Hello and welcome. Tonight, we won't unravel ancient philosophies, nor tread the clamor of battlefield films. There are no slow-motion cavalry charges, no shining armor or thundering drums. Instead, we step into a softer place, a quiet space between the turning of time and the hush of memory. There are no explosions here, only the rustling of paper, the soft scrape of ink across old parchment, and the beating of a heart that hoped to reach across oceans. Tonight, you'll listen not to a legend or a hero, but to someone almost forgotten. A man with muddy boots, a torn coat, and a pen in his hand. So find your place. Let your shoulders sink. Take in a long breath. And if this moment speaks to you, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly feels right. Tell us, from where in the world are you listening? And what time is it there in your quiet corner of night? Now close your eyes and let the story begin. It was 1917 when Thomas first found the letter. He hadn't been looking for anything in particular. That morning, he'd risen to the sound of boots crunching frost, his breath ghosting in the air like it didn't want to stay inside him. The war had become a rhythm by then. Mud, orders, waiting, and always the cold. Their trench near Ypres was quiet that day, too quiet. So he was assigned to help with supply sorting, an endless process of lifting crates, opening satchels, and redistributing things that smelled like stale tobacco and iron. At the bottom of one weather-worn pack, crammed between a tin of biscuits and a cracked compass, he found an envelope. It was sealed, yellow, and tied with a faded ribbon. The handwriting was soft, uneven, as if the pen had trembled in the hand of the writer. It read, "To Miss Eleanor Whitfield, Chatham, England. May this reach you in peace." No stamp, no return address. The soldier to whom the satchel belonged was already gone, killed 2 weeks prior by a mortar. His name Thomas never learned. He was just another one, as the man had begun to say with a quiet, hardened tone. Something about the envelope stopped him. He could have handed it over to an officer, left it with the rest of the things to be burned or buried or logged, but instead, he tucked it into his coat. That night, with a small lantern flickering near his boots, he opened the letter. The handwriting inside was delicate and uncertain. It spoke of longing, of the scent of a field after summer rain, of missing someone deeply, though it never said who. It ended only with, "I hope this finds you, Eleanor. I still dream of the way your name feels in my mouth." There was no signature. Thomas folded the letter back into its envelope, his fingers numb not just from the cold, but from the weight of words meant for someone else. And yet, he found himself thinking of her. Who was Eleanor? Had she ever received any of the soldiers' letters? Had she waited at a window for someone who never came back? Was she still alive? The next night, Thomas took out his own paper. He dipped his pen into the ink and paused. He hadn't written to anyone in months. His mother had stopped replying. His older brother had vanished in the chaos of Verdun. He began slowly, carefully. "Dear Miss Eleanor Whitfield, you don't know me. I found your name by accident, but something about it won't let me forget."
He didn't explain how he came across her letter. He wrote instead about the frost on the trenches, about how the wind whistled through cracks in the earth like an old woman's lullaby. He described a crow that sat on the edge of their camp and didn't move for days. He told her how sometimes, in the quiet between gunfire, He imagined the lives of the people back home. He signed the letter simply, yours, somewhere between the mud and the sky, Thomas. He didn't expect to write again. He folded it, addressed it, and left it in the outgoing mailbag, alongside reports and requisitions in censored words. But the next night, when the cold settled in his bones like a second skeleton, he found himself reaching for his pen again. He told her about a dream he had, a quiet Sunday morning, tea with too much milk, her voice, though he'd never heard it. He wrote as though she were real, not just a name, not just a ribbon on a letter. He wrote until the ink ran dry. It was in the quiet moments, those stretched thin between bursts of chaos, that Thomas found himself clinging to the fragile connection his words forged across the vast ocean. Each night, after the day's fatigue settled deep in his muscles and the cold whispered through the trenches like a ghostly hymn, he would unroll his worn parchment and dip his pen carefully into the inkwell, mindful not to spill the precious ink onto the coarse fabric of his uniform. The candle's flickering light cast shadows that danced upon the damp walls, and as the world outside settled into an uneasy silence, his thoughts journeyed far away from the mud and barbed wire that confined him. He wrote to Eleanor as if she were the only anchor in the endless tempest surrounding him. He told her about the endless gray skies that seemed to press down upon the land, the smell of earth turned over by distant explosions, and the ever-present hum of distant artillery that had become a morbid lullaby for the men who awaited their fate. His letters wove pictures of a life so far removed from the stench of gunpowder and blood. He spoke of a garden he had once imagined, filled with blooming roses and the soft hum of bees, a place where the sun warmed the air and laughter filled the spaces between leaves. In those moments, Thomas wasn't just a soldier trapped in a war zone. He was a storyteller, a dreamer weaving threads of hope into each letter that sailed unseen across the sea. And Eleanor, though she was just a name, a whisper in the distance, became the confidant who carried his soul in her hands. He wondered about her mornings, if she watched the sunrise through a lace curtain, or if she too felt the pangs of longing that gripped him nightly. Did she read his words with trembling hands, or did she tuck them away in a drawer, unsure of how to hold the stranger who dared to reach out from the horrors of war? Sometimes, Thomas imagined her in the soft glow of lamplight, seated by a window overlooking the cobblestone streets of Chatham. Maybe she traced the ink with her fingertips, feeling the shape of his thoughts, the warmth of his unspoken prayers. He pictured the gentle curve of her smile, the way her eyes might brighten with each new letter, breathing life into the fading embers of hope. But the war was relentless, and as the season shifted, so too did the fragile thread that bound them. Letters took longer to arrive. Some were lost beneath the weight of mud and rain, swallowed by the chaos of battles fought miles away from the quiet English countryside. The once steady rhythm of correspondence faltered, and the silence that followed was heavy with unspoken fears. Yet Thomas persisted. Each letter he sent was a defiant act of faith, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit amidst despair. He shared with Eleanor the camaraderie of his fellow soldiers, their laughter echoing briefly before the next storm of violence, and the quiet moments of tenderness when a stranger's hand would clasp his in shared understanding. He described the taste of rain on his lips, the way the earth softened beneath the weight of tears, and the fleeting glimpses of beauty that seemed almost impossible in a world torn apart. One night, as the trench walls shivered under the cold breath of winter, Thomas wrote of a letter he had received, one that bore no sender, only words that stirred something deep within him. It spoke of memories long buried, of promises whispered beneath a fading moon. He confided in Eleanor that perhaps through the tangled web of fate, their paths were meant to cross, not in flesh, but in spirit. that perhaps the letters were more than mere paper and ink. They were lifelines thrown across the void, fragile bridges connecting hearts in a time when so much was lost. In his final letter, Thomas wrote with a voice both weary and hopeful. He told Eleanor of a day when the war might end, when the guns would fall silent and the earth would heal its wounds. He painted a picture of a world reborn, where children would play beneath clear skies and love would no longer be shadowed by fear. He begged her to wait for him in that future, to hold on to the promise of peace as fiercely as he held on to his pen. As he sealed the letter, a sudden gust of wind rattled the trench, and the candle flickered low. Thomas felt the weight of the moment settle upon him, a quiet understanding that the road ahead was uncertain, but that the hope he carried was not his alone. Somewhere, across the sea, Eleanor's heart beat in time with his, bound together by words written in the stillness between storms.
And in that shared silence, their souls whispered a promise to remember, to wait, and to believe. That night, Thomas tucked his last letter into the mail pouch, his hands steady despite the cold. The dawn would bring new orders, new battles, and perhaps a future he could not foresee. But for now, as the stars faded and the first light of morning painted the sky, he held on to the fragile warmth of hope, a light in the darkest of trenches. Thomas's days blurred into one another, a somber rhythm of mud and rain and the distant thunder of artillery that seemed as endless as the sky above. Letters continued to flow from his hand, ink-weaving stories of survival, memories, and dreams shared with a woman he had never met, but whose name had become a beacon in the night. Each letter carried his voice across the ocean, a fragile tether to a world untouched by war's cruel grasp. In quieter moments, when the night wrapped around the trenches like a thick, comforting cloak, Thomas would imagine Eleanor reading his words. He pictured her sitting by a small window in a modest English home, the glow of a candle illuminating her thoughtful face as she traced the lines he had written. Perhaps she smiled softly, feeling the warmth of his presence despite the distance. Or maybe her eyes shimmered with tears, tears of hope, longing, or loss that mirrored his own. Months passed. The war dragged on with brutal persistence, but the letters remained a constant. They told of snow melting into spring, of the hesitant bloom of wildflowers in no man's land, of fleeting moments of peace amidst the chaos. Thomas shared his fears as openly as his hopes, revealing the fragility beneath the soldier's stoic exterior. He wrote about the friends lost, the nights spent staring at stars obscured by smoke, and the small kindnesses that kept humanity alive. One day, a reply arrived. It was simple and unadorned, written in a careful hand that trembled with emotion. Eleanor's words spilled across the page like a gentle stream, carrying warmth and gratitude. She told Thomas about the quiet town of Chatham, the gardens she tended, and the lonely hours spent waiting for news that never came. She spoke of her own fears and dreams, of a longing that mirrored his, and of the strange comfort found in the letters that connected them. Their correspondence blossomed into something tender and real, a lifeline that transcended the miles and the madness. Through their words, they built a world where hope endured, a sanctuary carved from ink and paper, safe from the storm. As the war edged toward its end, Thomas held on to that world with fierce determination. The trenches still trembled with gunfire, but his heart beat with the promise of peace. In his final letters, he spoke of returning home, of meeting Eleanor and walking together beneath clear skies. He imagined the day when their voices would no longer be confined to pages, but would mingle in laughter and song. But fate, as it often does, held other plans. One bitter evening, beneath a sky bruised by twilight, Thomas fell in the mud-soaked fields far from home. His last thoughts were of Eleanor, of the letters he had written and the dreams he had dared to dream. He hoped that somehow his words would find her, that the bridge they had built with ink would carry his spirit across the void. Back in England, Eleanor waited by her window, clutching the letters that had become her world. She never knew the fate of the soldier whose words had filled her nights with light. Yet in the quiet moments when the wind whispered through the trees, she felt his presence, as if their souls had touched across time and space, united by the fragile power of hope. And so their story lingers in the stillness, a testament to the strength of human connection, even in the darkest of times. It is a reminder that sometimes words alone can light the way through the night. The days stretched into weeks, and the weeks into months, as Thomas remained entrenched in the endless expanse of mud and wire, the war carving its relentless path through the lives of those caught in its grasp. Each dawn rose heavy and gray, a mirror to the sky that hung low and unyielding above the scarred landscape. Yet in the small hours before sunrise, when the world held its breath and the air hung still like a fragile promise, Thomas would sit by the faint glow of his lantern and take up his pen once more. The letters to Eleanor became the quiet pulse that sustained him, a thread of humanity spun from words written in hope rather than despair. He told her of the shifting seasons, of how the frozen earth softened beneath tentative rays of sunlight, and how wildflowers dared to bloom in the no-man's land that stretched between the opposing trenches. He described the simple things, a bird's call on a rare morning, the taste of rain mingled with the coppery scent of blood, and the echo of laughter shared in moments when the war seemed to pause, if only for a breath. Thomas wrote about the men who shared his fate, brothers forged in hardship, each one etched into his memories like carvings on ancient stone. He spoke of their kindness, their courage, their silent prayers whispered beneath a shattered moon. In his words, they lived on, beyond the cold and the chaos, in the sanctuary of his letters. Eleanor's replies came slowly at first, then with a steady rhythm that matched the beating of his own heart. Her words painted pictures of quiet English mornings, of gardens bathed in dew, and the rustling of leaves and gentle breezes. She spoke of waiting for news, for peace, for a future that seemed as distant as the stars themselves. Her letters carried the warmth of home, a beacon in the darkness that lit his way through endless nights. Through their exchange, a fragile bond blossomed, bridging the vast gulf of time and space that separated them. They shared dreams of a world healed, of days unmarked by sorrow, where the laughter of children would rise above the silence left by war. They spoke of love, not the grand declarations sung by poets, but the quiet, steadfast kind that grows in whispered moments and written words. As the war trudged onward, Thomas's letters grew more urgent, filled with the ache of longing and the flickering flame of hope. He told Eleanor of a letter that he had carried with him, folded and worn, a reminder of the life he yearned to reclaim. He confided in her his fears, the shadows that lurked in the trenches, the pain etched into his bones, and the weight of loss that pressed on his soul. Yet through it all, he clung to the promise of reunion, to the possibility that one day their words would leap from parchment to reality. One cold evening, beneath a sky heavy with snow-laden clouds, Thomas wrote what he knew might be his final letter. His hand trembled as he traced the ink across the page, each word a fragile farewell and a prayer. He asked Eleanor to remember him not as a soldier marked by war, but as a man who dared to dream of peace and love amidst the ruin. He painted a vision of a future where their paths would cross, where the letters would give way to embraces, and where the world would bloom anew.
That night, as silence settled over the trenches and the wind whispered mournful songs through the barren trees, Thomas closed his eyes for the last time. The battlefield held its breath, mourning a life ended too soon, yet celebrating the enduring light born from words written in hope. Far away, Eleanor sat by her window,
clutching the letters that had become her lifeline. She never learned of Thomas's fate, but in her heart their connection remained, a testament to the power of words to bridge even the darkest divides. The letters, weathered and worn, were more than ink on paper. They were the echoes of a promise whispered across the ages. And so, beneath the quiet sky, their story lives on, an eternal whisper of love, loss, and the courage to hold on. Thomas's world had become a mosaic of fleeting moments, brief reprieves in a landscape marred by destruction and despair. The war's harshness was unyielding, but within the confines of his mind and the pages of his letters, he cultivated a garden of fragile hope and human connection. Each word he wrote to Eleanor was a seed planted in that garden, nurtured by longing and the desire for something beyond the endless gray. He recounted to her the small wonders that offered respite in the trenches, the way the early morning fog clung to the earth like a silken veil, softening the jagged edges of devastation, the sudden appearance of a single wildflower blooming defiantly through the shattered soil, and the quiet companionship of a stray dog that had somehow found its way into their midst, offering comfort in its wagging tail and warm eyes. In his letters, Thomas shared stories of the men who fought beside him, their names, their dreams, their quiet heroism. There was Joseph, the gentle giant with a laugh that could pierce even the darkest moments. Samuel, whose fingers were deft at carving small wooden figures to pass the endless hours. And young Edward, barely 18, whose wide eyes held the weight of a lifetime he was too young to live. Through these stories, Eleanor came to know not just the soldier who wrote to her, but the world he inhabited, a world of brotherhood and sacrifice, painted both with sorrow and courage. Eleanor responded with letters filled with warmth and tenderness, describing the rhythms of life back home, the turning of seasons, and the small acts of kindness that kept hope alive amid uncertainty. She told Thomas about her mother's garden, where roses and lavender bloomed, filling the air with sweet fragrance, about the village church bells ringing on Sunday mornings, and about the quiet moments she spent reading by the fire, imagining the faces of those who fought far away. Their correspondence became a lifeline, a bridge between two souls suspended in different worlds, yet united by the fragile thread of words. Through ink and paper, they shared fears and dreams, hopes and memories, weaving a tapestry of connection that transcended the cruelty of war. As months wore on, Thomas grew ever more aware of the preciousness of each letter, each exchange a beacon in the encroaching darkness. He began to write not only to comfort Eleanor, but to hold on to his own humanity, to remind himself that beyond the mud and the gunfire lay a world waiting to be reclaimed. He wrote of the letters he imagined receiving in return, picturing Eleanor's hand as it traced his words, her breath catching at the tender phrases. He wondered if she read his letters beneath a soft lamplight, the shadows flickering across her thoughtful face. Did she feel his presence in the quiet moments? Did his words warm her heart as hers warmed his? Then, in one spring morning, the air thick with the scent of earth awakening, Thomas found a letter waiting for him. A letter unlike any before. It was from Eleanor. The ink was fresh, the handwriting careful and clear. Her words spoke of longing and hope, of prayers whispered beneath the stars, and of the courage it took to wait for a world healed from its wounds. She told Thomas about her mother's garden, where roses and lavender bloomed, filling the air with sweet fragrance, about the village church bells ringing on Sunday mornings, and about the quiet moments she spent reading by the fire, imagining the faces of those who fought far away. Their correspondence became a lifeline, a bridge between two souls suspended in different worlds, yet united by the fragile thread of words. Through ink and paper, they shared fears and dreams, hopes and memories, weaving a tapestry of connection that transcended the cruelty of war. But the war's grasp was unyielding, and fate's hand uncertain. In the final days of the conflict, as the world teetered on the edge of peace, Thomas faced battles that tested the limits of courage and endurance. His letters grew sparse, each one a precious testament to the fragile thread that tethered him to life and to Eleanor. And then, silence. No more letters came. Yet Eleanor held on to the ones she had, the worn pages filled with a soldier's heart. She kept them close, a treasure beyond measure, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could be found in the words we share and the connections we forge. The war finally drew to a close, its heavy hand slowly lifting as the world began to heal from the scars left behind. The once relentless thunder of artillery faded into echoes, and the earth, scarred and battered, began to reclaim its quiet beauty. Birds returned to sing over fields that had known only sorrow, and the sun rose with a gentler light, casting long shadows that whispered of peace. For Eleanor, the end of the war was bittersweet. The streets of Chatham filled with returning soldiers and the tentative laughter of those who had waited so long. But there was no word of Thomas, no letter, no message to mark his return. Only the memory of the words they had shared, the fragile bridge they had built with ink and hope. She kept his letters close, worn from constant reading, the edges softened by time and tears. They became her sanctuary, a testament to a bond that transcended the cruel distances of war. Each line carried the warmth of a man who had dared to dream of love amidst chaos, who had reached across the void with words that breathed life into her lonely nights. Eleanor often sat by her window in the fading light, imagining the man who had written those letters. She pictured his tired eyes, the determination etched on his face, and the courage it took to keep writing when all seemed lost. In her heart, she carried his spirit, a flame that refused to be extinguished. Meanwhile, across the sea, the trenches stood empty, the echoes of battles fought lingering like ghosts. Thomas's letters were discovered among the belongings of a fallen soldier, a silent testament to a story never fully told. Though he did not return, his words lived on, whispers of hope, love, and the enduring power of human connection.
Their story, fragile and fleeting, remains a quiet reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of hope can shine through. That letters, simple and unassuming, can become lifelines across the vastness of time and space. That sometimes a name written in ink can carry the weight of 1,000 unspoken dreams. And so, beneath the gentle glow of countless stars, Thomas and Eleanor's story lingers, a soft melody in the silence, a promise whispered on the wind, a testament to the enduring strength of the human heart. Marie worked quietly in the dim light of her small atelier, her fingers moving with practiced precision over the gray wool fabric spread across the worn wooden table. The steady hum of her sewing machine was the only sound breaking the stillness of the cramped room, save for the occasional soft scrape of needles against cloth or the rustle of thread. Outside, Paris lay shrouded beneath a veil of tension and silence, the shadows of occupation pressing heavy on every street and alleyway. Her task was deceptively simple: to repair and alter the uniforms of the German soldiers who patrolled the city. But Marie's true work lay hidden beneath the stitches. Using a delicate embroidery thread, she carefully wove secret messages into the seams, collars, and hems, tiny patterns of coded symbols and letters, invisible to the untrained eye, but clear to those who knew how to read them. Each uniform that left her hands carried more than fabric and thread. It carried hope, resistance, and a silent promise of rebellion. Her eyes, sharp and steady despite the weariness that tugged at her soul, scanned each stitch with care. Every loop, every cross of thread was deliberate, an intricate language sewn into the very fabric of oppression. The patterns told stories of safe houses, plans for sabotage, and warnings of patrol movements. Marie knew the risks. Discovery would mean certain death, but the weight of silence was heavier than fear. Her mind drifted to her family, fractured and broken by the war. Her father, once a tailor like her, had disappeared months ago, swallowed by the uncertainty of the conflict. Her mother waited each day with a fragile hope, her hands trembling as she held on to memories and prayers. Marie's defiance was born of love, forged in the quiet resolve to keep their spirits alive through threads of resistance. That evening, as twilight spilled softly through the dusty windows, the door creaked open and Henri stepped inside. His face, marked by exhaustion and determination, flickered with a brief, weary smile. He carried a bundle of fresh uniforms, wrapped tightly in brown paper, the next batch to be transformed into vessels of coded rebellion. Without words, he placed the package on the table, their shared understanding filling the space between them. Henri spoke in whispers, his voice low and urgent, recounting the latest news from the underground. Patrol routes shifted, new curfews enforced, and a planned sabotage on a railway line to disrupt enemy supply. Each detail was a thread in the larger tapestry of resistance, a dangerous dance choreographed by secrecy and courage. Marie listened, her fingers itching to translate the information into her delicate stitches. Hours passed unnoticed as she worked, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows that seemed to breathe with the pulse of the city. Her needle darted through fabric, her mind weaving the secret codes with care. Each uniform became a message, a silent act of rebellion carried under the noses of those who sought to control and silence. Outside, the city breathed in quiet despair and cautious hope. Paris, despite the weight of occupation, held its secrets close in the hands of those like Marie and Henri, ordinary people whose bravery was sewn into the very fabric of resistance. And so, in the heart of the occupied city, beneath layers of wool and thread, a silent war was waged, one stitch at a time. Marie's days blurred into one another, a rhythm of secrecy and subtle rebellion that carried her through the harsh winter of 1942. Each morning began before dawn, the cold air biting at her fingers as she opened the shuttered windows of her atelier, letting in the pale light that filtered through the gray Parisian sky. The city outside was a place transformed, a ghost of its former self, where fear and suspicion hung thick in the air like fog, and every shadow could conceal a threat. Yet inside her workshop, amid the scent of fabric and oil, Marie found a fragile sanctuary. Her hands moved with quiet determination, stitching messages into the uniforms with painstaking care. The threads she used were thin and fine, dyed in shades so subtle they blended seamlessly with the gray wool. To an untrained eye, the embroidery appeared as mere decoration, delicate vines, small geometric patterns, but to those who knew the code, they were lifelines of information,
courage woven into cloth. The letters Marie encoded spoke of safe houses tucked behind crumbling facades, of secret meetings held beneath the cover of night, and plans to derail trains carrying weapons that fueled the occupation. Every stitch was a whisper of defiance, a promise that resistance thrived even in the most unlikely places. She imagined the soldiers wearing these uniforms, unknowingly carrying the seeds of rebellion, their movements traced and watched by those who thought in shadows. Henry visited often, bringing fresh news and the latest batch of uniforms that required her skillful hands. His presence was a reminder of the dangerous world outside her atelier, of patrols prowling the streets, of arrests and disappearances, of the ever-present threat that hovered just beyond the door. Yet between them there was an unspoken bond, forged in shared purpose and silent understanding. One evening, as a heavy rain drummed against the rooftops, Henri confided a plan that set Marie's heart pounding. A convoy was scheduled to pass through the city, carrying supplies vital to the occupiers' efforts, and a coordinated strike was being organized to disrupt it. The embroidered messages she wove into the uniforms would be the key to timing and coordination, enabling resistance fighters to act with precision and avoid detection. Marie worked late into the night, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across the walls. Her fingers, numb from cold and strain, never faltered as she brought the codes to life beneath her needle. She thought of the men and women who would receive the messages, who would risk everything to fight for freedom. Each stitch was a prayer, a plea for courage and endurance. Her mind often wandered to her family, the father who had vanished into the fog of war, the mother who waited with quiet hope, and the city that clung to its dignity despite the crushing weight of occupation. Marie's own story was one of survival and silent resistance, a testament to the power of ordinary acts to defy extraordinary darkness.
The uniforms, once finished, were carefully folded and handed back to Henri, who carried them away into the night. Marie watched from the window as he disappeared into the mist-shrouded streets, the fragile thread of hope she had sewn now weaving through the fabric of the city itself. Days turned to weeks, and with each new batch of uniforms, the network of coded messages grew stronger. The resistance began to strike with increasing boldness, disrupting supply lines and sabotaging communications. The city held its breath, caught between fear and the fierce determination of those who dared to dream of liberation. Yet danger loomed ever closer. Marie knew that discovery would mean death, that a single misstep could unravel everything. The secret embroidery was her weapon and her burden, a silent rebellion stitched into every seam. One cold morning, a knock at the door startled her. A stranger stood in the doorway, an officer, his eyes sharp and searching. Marie's heart froze, but she met his gaze with steady calm. She hid the unfinished uniforms and the scraps of coded thread beneath the table, praying that the ordinary appearance of her workshop would be enough to shield her from her secret. The officer asked questions about her work, his tone polite but probing. Marie answered with quiet honesty, careful not to reveal more than necessary. After what felt like an eternity, he left with a curt nod, leaving behind a silence thick with unspoken threats. That night, as she stitched by candlelight, Marie felt the weight of the moment settle upon her. The city was a fragile thread itself, stretched taut between hope and despair. Yet she refused to let fear sever the bonds of resistance. Her needle moved faster, the coded messages flowing beneath her fingers like a river of light in the darkness. Each stitch was a defiant promise that no matter the cost, the spirit of Paris would endure. And so, beneath the watchful eyes of the occupying forces, a young seamstress wove her courage into fabric, stitching together the fragile threads of hope that would one day unravel the shadow of occupation. The bitter chill of winter had begun to wane, yielding slowly to the tentative warmth of early spring, but the atmosphere in Paris remained heavy with the unspoken dread that had settled since the city's occupation. Marie's atelier was a haven not just of thread and fabric, but of whispered hope and quiet resistance, a sanctuary from the fear that lurked in every corner. Each day, as she sat at her worn wooden table, she became more than a seamstress. She became a silent messenger, a keeper of secrets sewn into the very cloth that would be worn by the unwitting bearers of her carefully crafted words. The coded embroidery had become more than a tool. It was a language, intricate and beautiful, spoken in loops and crosses, in delicate tendrils of thread that seemed to bloom like flowers on the harsh wool uniforms. To the naked eye, it was nothing more than ornamentation, a trace of art amid the grim utilitarianism imposed by the occupiers. But for those who understood, it was a lifeline, a map, a warning, a call to arms. Marie's fingers ached from the relentless work, but she never allowed fatigue to dull her resolve. Each stitch was a testament to a spirit unbroken, a quiet rebellion that pulsed beneath the surface of a city that many had written off as lost. She thought often of the men and women who risked their lives to intercept these messages, who moved like shadows through the narrow streets and forgotten tunnels beneath Paris. Her thread was their guide, a beacon in the night. One evening, as the sky darkened and rain began to tap softly against the windows, Ali arrived with news that sent a shiver through the room. The resistance had uncovered plans for a massive roundup, an operation designed to crush the underground networks and break the spirit of the city's defenders. The coming days would be fraught with danger, and the embroidered messages would play a crucial role in alerting the resistance fighters to avoid capture and strike back when the moment was right. Marie's hands flew over the fabric, her needle weaving a tapestry of warnings and instructions that could mean the difference between life and death. The pressure was immense, but her focus never wavered. She knew that every thread mattered, that every symbol could save a comrade or condemn them to silence. As she worked, her thoughts drifted to the stories she had heard, of families torn apart, of brave souls who had vanished into the night, never to be seen again. She carried their memories in her heart, stitching their names and dreams into the very fabric she mended. It was a sacred duty, one that transcended fear and despair. In the quiet moments between bursts of frantic sewing, Marie allowed herself to dream, a dangerous indulgence, but a necessary one. She imagined the day when Paris would be free again, when the city's streets would once more echo with laughter and music instead of marching boots. But reality was relentless. The city remained under the iron grip of occupation, and every day brought new challenges, new threats. The network of resistance fighters moved cautiously, their lives balanced on the razor's edge of discovery. Marie's embroidered messages were lifelines, fragile yet vital threads woven through the tapestry of defiance. One particularly cold night, as Marie prepared the last batch of uniforms for Ali to deliver, a sudden noise startled her. The door to the atelier creaked open, and a figure stepped inside, a young woman with eyes full of urgency and fear. She was a courier, carrying word of a new crackdown, a sweep that would begin at dawn. Together they worked quickly to encode the latest warnings into the uniforms, their hands moving in silent coordination. Time was against them, but the thread of resistance held strong. The courier left with the precious cargo, disappearing into the shadows as the city held its breath.
Days later, news filtered through the underground network. The warning had saved many lives, allowing resistance fighters to evade capture and regroup. The embroidered messages had done their work. Marie allowed herself a rare moment of quiet relief, but she knew the struggle was far from over. The war still raged, and the price of defiance was high. Yet, beneath the weight of fear and loss, her needle continued to weave, stitching hope into every seam, courage into every fold. She was a silent warrior, fighting with thread and whisper, weaving the fabric of freedom, one stitch at a time. Winter had given way to a hesitant spring, but the heavy fog of occupation still clung to the streets of Paris like a shroud.
The city's heartbeat was faint but persistent, echoing through narrow alleys and quiet cafes, beneath the watchful eyes of soldiers and collaborators alike. Marie's atelier remained a refuge of quiet resilience, a place where the soft murmur of her sewing machine blended with the whispered hopes of a city yearning for freedom. Each day, Marie poured her soul into her work, transforming the dull gray uniforms into secret vessels of coded rebellion. Her needle moved with a rhythm born of necessity and defiance, threading messages that fluttered like invisible wings beneath collars and cuffs. These delicate patterns were more than mere decoration. They were the lifelines of a hidden war fought in shadows and silence. She thought often of Henri, whose visits brought both news and the weight of responsibility. His face, lined with exhaustion and determination, was a constant reminder of the stakes at play. Together they navigated the treacherous waters of secrecy, their unspoken trust a fragile bond forged in the fires of resistance. One evening, as the city lights flickered through rain-streaked windows, Henri brought troubling news. A major crackdown was imminent, one that threatened to dismantle the fragile networks holding the resistance together. Marie listened intently, her mind already racing to encode the critical information into the next batch of uniforms. Working late into the night, she stitched warnings of raids and secret rendezvous, weaving hope and strategy into the fabric. Her hands ached, but her resolve was unshaken. Every stitch was a prayer for those risking everything to stand against tyranny. The uniforms, carefully folded and concealed, were entrusted to couriers who disappeared into the labyrinthine streets. Marie watched from her window as shadows moved like whispers beneath the pale glow of street lamps, carrying the silent messages to those who needed them most. Days turned into weeks, and the resistance endured. The city breathed in cautious relief as the worst of the crackdown passed, thanks in no small part to the secret communications hidden in plain sight. Marie's work was a small but vital thread in the tapestry of defiance that refused to unravel. Yet the danger was never far. One cold morning, soldiers arrived at the building next door. The sound of boots echoed ominously through the narrow street. Marie's heart pounded, each beat a reminder of the precariousness of her existence. She continued her work with quiet determination, her eyes sharp for any sign of suspicion. The atelier was her fortress, the needle her weapon. In the face of fear, she chose courage. As spring blossomed fully into summer, the tide of war began to shift. Rumors of liberation stirred the air, carried on the breath of hopeful whispers. Marie dared to dream of a city freed from shadows, of streets alive with light and laughter. Her letters to Henri, once sparse and coded, grew more confident, filled with plans for the future and the promise of renewal. Yet beneath the hope, there remained a cautious vigilance, a recognition that freedom was fragile, earned through sacrifice. Marie's story was one of countless untold tales, of quiet heroism woven into the fabric of history. Through the delicate art of embroidery, she stitched a legacy of resilience and resistance, a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage could ripple through time. And so, beneath the fading light of occupation, in the heart of a city battered but unbroken, a young seamstress wove the threads of hope that would one day restore the soul of Paris. The sea stretched endlessly beyond the cliffs, its restless waves whispering secrets to the wind as it crashed tirelessly against the ragged rocks below. The lighthouse stood sentinel atop the rugged coast, a solitary guardian casting its beam across the dark waters, guiding lost souls safely home. Within its weathered walls lived Isla, the keeper's daughter, whose days were shaped by the rhythms of tides and light. Isla's life was one of quiet solitude and steady purpose. From dawn until dusk, she moved through the lighthouse with practiced grace, tending the great lamp that pierced the night, ensuring its glow never faltered.
The scent of salt and seaweed clung to the air, mingling with the faint hum of the wind through the tower's windows. It was a world apart, isolated yet intimately connected to the vastness of the ocean. Her father, a stern but kind man, had kept the lighthouse for decades. He taught her the language of the sea, the shifting colors of the sky, the changing patterns of the clouds, the subtle signs that foretold storms or calm. Together, they maintained the ancient mechanisms that kept the light burning bright, a beacon against the darkness. Isla found comfort in the predictability of her days, the steady routine a balm against the wildness beyond the cliffs. Yet, beneath her calm exterior, her heart carried a quiet yearning, a longing for something more than the lonely watchtower, for stories beyond the horizon. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of lavender and gold, Isla spotted a small boat struggling against the mounting waves. The sea churned with sudden fury, and the vessel was tossed as if caught in a tempest's wrath. Without hesitation, she rang the bell, sounding an urgent call that echoed across the cliffs and into the night. Her father joined her quickly, and together they prepared the rescue boat, their movements swift and practiced. The storm was gathering strength, the wind howling like a wild beast, but Isla's determination burned brighter than any gale. They set out into the swirling darkness, guided by the flickering light of the lighthouse and the hope of saving those imperiled by the sea. The boat rocked violently, each wave threatening to engulf them, but Isla held firm, her hands steady on the oars. The cries of those in the water were carried on the wind, fragmented and distant, but unmistakable. Inch by inch, they approached the struggling vessel, reaching out into the blackness to pull survivors from the icy grasp of the ocean. Among them was a young man, weary and cold, whose eyes met Isla's with a mixture of fear and gratitude. In that moment, the vast loneliness of the lighthouse seemed to shift, replaced by a connection that spanned the tempest and the night. Back on shore, the rescued were tended to by the small coastal village. Isla watched from the lighthouse window as the flames of a fire flickered, casting warm light against the darkening sky. The night was alive with whispered stories of survival and hope, carried on the salt-tinged breeze. In the days that followed, Isla found herself drawn to the young man, whose name was Ewan. He spoke of distant lands and adventures across the sea, of sun-drenched islands, towering mountains, and bustling ports where languages mingled like music. Yet despite his wanderlust, he found himself drawn to the steady rhythm of the lighthouse and the calm strength of Isla. Their days intertwined like the tides, rising and falling with shared moments of laughter, contemplation, and the simple pleasure of companionship. As spring deepened into summer, the village by the sea thrived with the promise of warmer days. Fishermen set out with hope in their hearts, children played along the shore, and the scent of wildflowers mingled with the salty breeze. But the sea, ever unpredictable, held its secrets close. Storms could rise suddenly, darkening the skies and turning the waves into towering walls of water. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery glow across the sky, Isla and Ewan prepared for the night watch. The lighthouse lantern was polished to a brilliant gleam, its beam a sharp lance cutting through the gathering dusk. Together they climbed the winding staircase to the top, where the wind whipped fiercely around them, carrying the briny scent of the ocean. From their vantage point, they watched as a fishing boat struggled against the mounting waves, its small frame tossed like a toy in the tempest's grip. Without hesitation, Isla rang the fog bell, its deep toll echoing across the cliffs and into the village below. The call was urgent, a plea for aid in the face of impending danger. The villagers responded swiftly, lighting lanterns and readying boats for the rescue. Isla and Ewan descended to join them, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The sea was wild and unforgiving, but the community's resolve was unwavering.
Launching into the churning waters, they battled the storm's fury, their faces streaked with rain and salt. The cries of those stranded on the boat pierced the howling wind, guiding the rescuers to their perilous task. One by one, they hauled their neighbors to safety, warmth, and the comforting glow of home. In the aftermath, as the storm subsided and the stars emerged like scattered jewels across the velvet sky, Isla stood by the lighthouse, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The sea had taken much, but it had also revealed the strength of those who called this rugged coast home. Ewan approached quietly, his hand finding hers in the chill night air. They stood together, two souls tethered not just by circumstance, but by the shared light of hope and resilience. The lighthouse's beams swept across the waves, a steadfast reminder that even in the darkest nights, a guiding light could lead one safely home. Days passed into weeks, and with each sunrise, Isla felt her world expand beyond the walls of the lighthouse. The seasons turned, painting the landscape in hues of green and gold. The village celebrated the harvest festival, laughter and music spilling through the streets like a balm for weary hearts. Yet amidst the joy, Isla remained grounded by the knowledge that the sea was both a giver and taker of life, a force to be respected and revered. Her connection to the lighthouse, to Ewan, and to the enduring spirit of the coast was a testament to the delicate balance between human courage and nature's wild majesty. As summer waned, the air grew crisp, and the first hints of autumn whispered through the trees. Isla found herself standing at the edge of the cliffs, the wind tugging gently at her hair. Below, the waves crashed with timeless rhythm, a song of endings and beginnings. She thought of the journey ahead, of the unknown horizons yet to be explored and the stories yet to be written. The lighthouse would always be her anchor, a place of light amid shadow. And with Ewan by her side, the vastness of the sea seemed less daunting, its mysteries inviting rather than forbidding. Together they dreamed of voyages beyond the rocky shores, of paths winding through mist and sun, where love and hope would guide their way. And so, beneath the endless sky and the watchful gaze of the lighthouse, Isla's story unfolded, a tale of steadfast light, enduring love, and the courage to face the unknown with an open heart.
The days grew shorter as autumn's breath swept across the rugged coastline, painting the landscape with hues of amber and rust. The once vibrant greens of summer faded into a tapestry of gold and crimson, and the sea, ever restless, seemed to grow quieter, as if holding its breath beneath the gathering clouds. Isla moved through the lighthouse with a grace born of habit and reverence, her hands steady as she prepared the lamp for the coming nights. The beacon's glow was a steadfast presence in the encroaching darkness, a symbol of hope to weary sailors and distant souls alike. Ewan remained by her side, his gaze often drifting toward the horizon where sky met sea in an endless embrace. Though his spirit longed for the call of distant shores, he found solace in the rhythms of the lighthouse and the steady warmth of Isla's presence. Together, they navigated the delicate balance between longing and belonging, their bond deepening with each passing day. One evening, as twilight melted into night, a fierce storm gathered over the sea. The wind howled through the cliffs like a wild creature unleashed, and rain lashed against the windows in relentless sheets. The waves rose like mountains, crashing against the rocks with a fury that shook the very earth beneath the lighthouse's foundation. Isla stood vigil at the top of the tower, her eyes fixed on the roiling waters below. The great lamp cut through the storm's darkness, its beam a slender thread of light weaving a path through the chaos. Her heart pounded in time with the thunder that rolled across the sky, a fierce rhythm that echoed the turmoil within. Suddenly, a flash of lightning illuminated a small vessel struggling against the tempest. The boat was barely visible amid the towering waves, its fragile frame battered and tossed as if caught in the jaws of the sea itself. Without hesitation, Isla rang the fog bell,
its deep, mournful toll reverberating through the storm, a clarion call to the villagers and rescue crews. Ewan joined her swiftly, his face set with determination. Together, they descended the spiral staircase, bracing against the gale as they prepared to launch a rescue mission. The village was alive with urgent activity, lanterns flickered in the storm, and voices rose in shouts over the howling wind. The rescue boat was launched into the furious sea, cutting through the waves with courage born of necessity. Ela and Ewan stood side by side, their hands steady on the oars despite the violent toss of the water. The cries of the stranded crew echoed across the storm, guiding them toward those in peril. Hours passed in a blur of rain, wind, and adrenaline. One by one, they pulled survivors from the icy grip of the ocean, faces etched with fear and relief. Among them was a young sailor, his eyes wide with disbelief, who clung to Ela's hand with trembling gratitude. As dawn broke, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, the storm finally began to relent. The village gathered on the shore. A chorus of whispered thanks and relieved sighs filled the crisp morning air. Ela stood at the edge of the cliffs, the weight of the night's trials settling into a quiet resolve. In the days that followed, the bonds between the villagers grew stronger, woven together by shared hardship and triumph. Ela and Ewan's relationship deepened as well, their hearts tethered not just by circumstance, but by a profound understanding born of facing the sea's fury together. Winter approached with a hush, blanketing the coast in frost and snow. The lighthouse continued its tireless vigil, its light a constant in the shifting seasons. Ela, wrapped in layers against the cold, maintained the beacon with unwavering dedication, her spirit as enduring as the stone tower itself. And though the sea's mysteries remained vast and unknowable, Ela faced each day with courage, guided by the steady light within and the love that had blossomed amidst the storm. Her story, like the lighthouse's beam, was a testament to resilience, hope, and the enduring power of connection, an eternal flame against the dark, leading all who wander toward home. The morning mist clung softly to the rolling hills of the English countryside, wrapping the ancient monastery in a delicate veil of silence and light. The stone walls, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, stood steadfast beneath a sky brushed with pale hues of dawn. Within the quiet cloisters, a secret garden lay hidden, a sanctuary of blooms and whispers, forgotten by time, but alive with stories untold. Amelia, a young woman drawn to solitude and the mysteries of nature, had recently arrived at the monastery to serve as its caretaker. The weight of history surrounded her, yet the peaceful rhythm of the place soothed a restless heart. Each day, she wandered the cloistered paths, tending to the gardens and listening to the gentle murmur of the breeze through ancient oaks and ivy-clad walls. The garden was unlike any Amelia had ever known, a tapestry of wildflowers and carefully tended beds, where roses climbed with graceful abandon and lavender perfumed the air. It was a place of refuge, a quiet world suspended between earth and sky, where time slowed and the soul could breathe. Though the monastery's monks had long since departed, their presence lingered in the faded frescoes and carved stone, and in the stories whispered by the garden itself. Amelia felt a deep connection to this place, as if the very earth held memories waiting to be uncovered. One day, while clearing a patch of overgrown vines near an ancient sundial, Amelia discovered a weathered journal hidden beneath the roots. Its pages were yellowed and fragile, filled with delicate handwriting that spoke of a forgotten era, a time when the garden was a living sanctuary for monks and villagers alike, a place of healing and hope.
As she read, Amelia became immersed in the life of Eleanor, a young novice who had cared for the garden centuries before. Eleanor's words revealed a world where faith and nature intertwined, where each bloom carried a prayer and every season marked a sacred journey. The journal told of a secret, a hidden gate that led to a secluded part of the garden where rare herbs and flowers with extraordinary healing properties grew.
This garden within a garden had been tended in secrecy, protected from the turmoil beyond the monastery walls. Driven by curiosity and a sense of kinship, Amelia set out to find this hidden sanctuary. Guided by Eleanor's descriptions and the faint sketches in the journal, she followed winding paths and ancient stone markers, her heart beating with anticipation. After days of searching beneath a tangle of ivy and moss, she uncovered the gate, a delicate wrought iron arch entwined with blooming jasmine. Beyond it lay a garden unlike any she had imagined, a kaleidoscope of colors and fragrances where the sunlight filtered softly through ancient trees and a quiet magic seemed to pulse beneath the soil. In this secret garden, Amelia felt a profound peace, as if she had stepped into a dream woven from the past and present. She tended the rare herbs, learning their names and uses, and felt the garden's healing touch seep into her own weary spirit. The garden became her sanctuary, a bridge between centuries, where she could honor the legacy of those who had come before and nurture the life blossom anew. Each day, as she cared for the plants and read Eleanor's words, Amelia found herself growing, not just in knowledge, but in grace and strength. The seasons turned, and with each passing month, the garden flourished under her care. Wildflowers danced in the breeze, and the air was thick with the scent of blossoms and earth. Visitors came occasionally, drawn by whispers of the monastery's beauty and the garden's quiet power, leaving with hearts lighter and spirits renewed. Amelia knew that the true magic of the garden was not just in its blooms or herbs, but in the stories it held. The stories of faith, resilience, and the enduring connection between nature and the human soul. As twilight fell one evening, the garden bathed in the soft glow of lanterns, Amelia stood beneath the jasmine arch, feeling the pulse of life all around her. The past and present intertwined in a delicate dance, a timeless testament to hope and renewal. In the quiet of the secret garden, beneath a sky full of stars, Amelia found a home, not just among the stones and flowers, but within the eternal rhythm of growth, healing, and love. Amelia's days settled into a gentle rhythm, shaped by the tender care she gave to the secret garden and the quiet moments of reflection it inspired. The sun would rise softly over the hills, spilling warm light across the dew-kissed petals, while the air filled with the hum of bees and the sweet scent of blossoms. Within this serene haven, time seemed to slow, allowing her heart to mend and her spirit to breathe freely. The journal of Eleanor remained a treasured companion, its fragile pages a bridge to a past rich with faith, hope, and devotion. Amelia often found herself reading aloud beneath the ancient oaks, the words weaving a tapestry of stories that seemed to come alive amidst the rustling leaves and singing birds. Eleanor's life unfolded in her mind, a young woman whose days were spent nurturing the earth, whose prayers were carried on the wind, and whose courage blossomed in the face of uncertainty. As Amelia tended the rare herbs hidden within the garden's secret alcove, she discovered not only their healing properties, but also the profound symbolism they held. Lavender for calm and peace, rosemary for remembrance, thyme for courage. Each plant was a living prayer, a reminder that even in hardship, life could flourish and heal. One crisp autumn morning, as amber leaves drifted gently to the ground, Amelia encountered a visitor, a scholar named Thomas, who had come seeking knowledge of the monastery's history. His eyes sparkled with curiosity and kindness, and soon the two of them found themselves sharing stories beneath the sheltering branches of the garden's ancient trees. Thomas spoke of forgotten traditions and ancient lore, his voice a gentle melody blending with the rustle of the wind. Together, they explored the garden's hidden corners, tracing the delicate patterns carved into weathered stones and uncovering clues left by those who had walked these paths centuries before. Their companionship blossomed like the garden itself,
rooted in mutual respect and a shared love for the quiet beauty of the place. Thomas's laughter brought warmth to Amelia's days, and her presence offered him a solace he had long sought. In the embrace of the secret garden, two souls found a connection that transcended time. As winter approached, the garden transformed once again. Frost kissed the petals, and the air grew crisp and still. Yet beneath the barren branches, life pulsed unseen, a promise of renewal waiting beneath the frozen earth. Amelia wrapped herself in layers against the cold, tending to the garden with unwavering devotion, her heart full of hope and quiet strength. One evening, beneath a sky glittering with stars, Amelia and Thomas stood together by the ancient sundial, its shadow a silent witness to the passage of time. They spoke softly of dreams and futures, of the ways in which the garden had healed their spirits and bound their lives. In that moment, surrounded by the whispers of the past and the gentle embrace of the present, Amelia felt a deep peace, a knowing that the secret garden was not merely a place, but a living testament to the enduring power of love, faith, and renewal.
As the monastery slept beneath the moon's silver glow, the garden breathed softly, its stories unfolding like petals in the night. And Amelia, its devoted guardian, carried forward the legacy of those who had come before, weaving new chapters into the timeless tapestry of life. The first snows of winter began to fall gently upon the ancient monastery, dusting the gardens with a soft white blanket that muted the colors and quieted the world. Amelia moved through the crisp air with purpose, her breath forming delicate clouds as she wrapped herself tightly in a woolen cloak. Though the garden lay dormant beneath the frost, its secrets remained alive beneath the earth, waiting patiently for the return of warmth and light. Inside the monastery's stone walls, the hearth crackled with a welcoming fire, casting flickering shadows that danced upon the weathered tapestries and carved beams. Amelia and Thomas spent long evenings there, poring over dusty manuscripts and sharing whispered stories of the past. Their bond deepened, nourished by a shared reverence for history and the fragile beauty of the hidden garden. One night, as the wind howled outside and snow piled against the narrow windows, Amelia uncovered a faded map tucked within the pages of Eleanor's journal. The delicate ink lines traced paths she had not yet explored, hinting at a hidden chamber beneath the monastery, perhaps a sanctuary or a place of great significance long forgotten. Intrigued and eager, Amelia and Thomas set out the next morning to follow the map's clues. The stone corridors were cold and silent, their footsteps echoing softly as they navigated twisting passages and secret doors concealed by ivy and time. After hours of searching, they discovered a narrow staircase spiraling downward into the depths beneath the monastery. With lanterns held high, they descended into the cool darkness, their hearts pounding with a mix of anticipation and reverence. At the base of the stairs, a heavy wooden door barred their path, its surface carved with symbols of protection and faith. Together, they pushed it open to reveal a small chamber bathed in a soft, golden light. Inside, the air was fragrant with herbs and ancient incense, and along the walls hung tapestries woven with intricate patterns of vines and blossoms. In the center stood a stone altar, adorned with offerings of dried flowers and candles long since extinguished. It was a sacred place, a hidden sanctuary where monks had once sought solace and strength. Amelia ran her fingers gently over the carvings, feeling the pulse of history beneath her touch. The chamber seemed to breathe with the prayers and hopes of generations past, a timeless refuge amid a world of change. In that sacred space, Amelia and Thomas found a renewed sense of purpose, a calling to preserve and protect the legacy of the monastery and its secret garden. They vowed to care for the land, to share its healing gifts, and to honor the stories etched into stone and soil. As winter deepened, the garden rested beneath its snowy shroud, but life stirred beneath the surface. Amelia's hands were already dreaming of spring, of planting seeds and coaxing blooms from the earth's embrace. The cycle of renewal was eternal, and within it lay the promise of hope and transformation. The bond between Amelia and Thomas grew stronger with each passing day, their shared journey weaving new stories into the tapestry of the monastery's history. Together, they nurtured the garden and each other, finding strength in love and faith amid the quiet beauty of their secret sanctuary. And so, beneath the sheltering stones and whispering trees, the legacy of the Forgotten Monastery blossomed anew, a timeless dance of growth and healing, rooted in the enduring power of nature and the human heart. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden shadows over the sleepy town of Willow Creek. The rhythmic clatter of train wheels on steel rails echoed softly through the quiet streets, a familiar melody that had marked the passage of time for generations. Here, life moved at its own gentle pace, measured in the changing of seasons and the stories whispered along the old railroad tracks. In a small house near the edge of town lived Samuel, a man whose eyes held the quiet wisdom of years spent watching the trains come and go. His days were simple, filled with tending to the garden, repairing weathered fences, and listening to the distant whistle of the locomotive as it sliced through the horizon. Samuel's connection to the railroad was deep and personal. As a boy, he had dreamed of adventures on the rails, of far-off places and the promise of discovery. But life had led him back to Willow Creek, where he found beauty in the familiar, the gentle sway of the tall grass, the laughter of children playing beneath the elm trees, and the steady pulse of the train that linked his town to the wider world. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves turned brilliant shades of amber and crimson, Samuel sat on his porch watching the arrival of a special train, one that carried more than passengers and freight. On board was a letter, long awaited and carefully sealed, destined to change the course of a quiet life. The letter came from Clara, a childhood friend whose voice had been a constant in his memories despite years of silence. She wrote of new beginnings, of hopes rekindled, and paths that might once again intertwine. Reading her words, Samuel felt a warmth blossom within, a flicker of possibility amid the fading light. Inspired, he decided to walk the length of the railroad that day, following the tracks that had shaped his life and carried so many stories. As he strolled beneath the rustling trees, he thought of the town's history, the families who had built it, the moments of joy and sorrow that had echoed along the rails. Along the way, he met neighbors and friends, each with their own tales of the railroad's impact. The conductor who had shared a kind word during difficult times, the engineer whose whistle had marked celebrations and farewells, the children who had imagined grand adventures on passing trains. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and purple, Samuel found himself at the old station, a place where memories lingered in the worn benches and faded timetables. Here, amid the quiet hum of the evening, he felt a deep connection to the past and a renewed hope for the future.
The train's whistle sounded once more, a call that stirred the heart and beckoned forward. Samuel knew that life, like the railroad, was a journey, one marked by stops and starts, by goodbyes and hellos, by the steady rhythm of time itself. With a gentle smile, he turned homeward, carrying with him the whispers of the old railroad and the promise of new stories yet to be told. The gentle hum of the evening settled over Willow Creek as Samuel walked slowly away from the old station, the fading light casting a soft glow upon the worn wooden planks beneath his feet. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant smoke from chimneys, mingling with the faint echo of the train's whistle still lingering in the cool breeze. His thoughts drifted back to Clara's letter, each word alive with the promise of a new chapter, stirring feelings he hadn't dared to feel in years. As he meandered along the winding path that paralleled the railroad tracks, Samuel noticed the subtle changes in the town, the peeling paint on the old general store, the freshly tended garden at Mrs. Whitaker's cottage, and the children playing tag beneath the sprawling branches of the grand elm tree. Despite the passage of time, the essence of Willow Creek remained steadfast, a place where stories wove together like the ties beneath the rails, holding the community tightly in shared history and hope. His footsteps eventually brought him to the edge of the town, where the tracks stretched endlessly into the horizon, vanishing into the golden haze of the setting sun. Here, the world felt vast and open, a canvas of possibility, painted by the gentle rhythm of the train's journey. Samuel breathed deeply, feeling the cool air fill his lungs, grounding him in the moment. Memories surfaced of youthful dreams spent watching the trains pass by, the thrill of imagining distant lands beyond the curve of the tracks. Yet, intertwined with those dreams were moments of quiet contentment, the laughter of friends, the warmth of family gatherings, the simple joy of watching the seasons change. Life in Willow Creek was a mosaic of such moments, stitched together by time and shared experience. Suddenly, a soft rustling in the nearby bushes caught his attention. Emerging into the fading light was a young boy, no older than 10, clutching a small wooden toy train. His eyes sparkled with curiosity and wonder as he approached Samuel cautiously. "Hello, Mr. Samuel. Are you watching the trains too?" "I have been for many years, little one. The trains carry stories, you know. Stories of people and places, of journeys both near and far." The boy's face lit up. "Can you tell me a story about the railroad? A real one?" Samuel nodded, motioning for the boy to sit beside him on the grassy bank. As twilight deepened, he began weaving a tale of a brave engineer who once saved a town from a great flood by driving his train through raging waters to warn the people, of a conductor who always carried a secret watchband passed down from his grandfather that was said to bring good luck to every journey. The boy listened intently, eyes wide with amazement, his imagination ignited by the stories carried on the wind. Around them the night deepened, and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, like tiny lanterns guiding travelers home. When the story ended, the boy looked up at Samuel with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Mr. Samuel. I want to be a train conductor someday." "Then you have a wonderful journey ahead," Samuel replied, his heart warmed by the boy's dreams. As the boy ran back toward the village, Samuel sat quietly, watching the darkening sky. The railroad had carried many stories, and now it was carrying new ones, stories of hope, dreams, and the endless journey of life. With a contented sigh, Samuel rose and turned toward home, the train's whistle calling softly in the distance, a timeless melody echoing through the heart of Willow Creek. As night settled over Willow Creek, A gentle hush blanketed the town. The distant whistle of the train echoed softly through the cool air, weaving its way between the cottages and fields, a lullaby for all who listened. Samuel stood on his porch, the worn wood beneath his feet creaking faintly, as he leaned on the railing, gazing up at the stars that twinkled like tiny fires in the vast sky. Clara's letter rested in his coat pocket, its presence a comforting weight against his chest. Memories of days long past stirred within him, the laughter of childhood friends, the warmth of family gatherings, and the dreams sparked by the endless stretch of railroad tracks. Yet alongside these recollections was the quiet knowledge that life had brought change and distance, separating him from those he once held dear. Still, hope lingered in the night air, fragile yet persistent. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the maple trees, casting dappled shadows on the path leading to the station. Samuel, with a renewed sense of purpose, decided to visit the town's small museum, a repository of Willow Creek's history and stories. The curator, Mrs. Parsons, greeted him with a knowing smile, her eyes reflecting the pride of a community deeply connected to its roots. Together they wandered through exhibits of old photographs, faded letters, and artifacts that whispered of the railroad's golden days. Samuel pointed to a sepia-toned image of a bustling station, the platform crowded with travelers and porters, steam rising like ghostly clouds into the sky. This was where my grandfather worked," he said softly. "He told me stories of the trains, the people, the lives that passed through this town." Mrs. Parsons nodded. "The railroad shaped us all. It brought opportunity, connection, and sometimes heartache, but it's those stories that keep our spirit alive." Inspired, Samuel offered to help organize a community event celebrating the railroad's legacy. The idea blossomed quickly, with neighbors eager to share their own memories, photographs, and heirlooms. Children prepared drawings of trains and tracks, while elders recounted tales of journeys both ordinary and extraordinary. On the day of the celebration, the town gathered near the station, transformed with banners, lanterns, and tables laden with homemade treats. The air buzzed with laughter, music, and the hum of shared history. Samuel stood among friends old and new, his heart full as he watched children chase each other beneath the elm trees, their eyes bright with wonder. Clara arrived with the afternoon train, stepping onto the platform with a smile that bridged years and miles. Their eyes met across the crowd, and in that moment the distance melted away. Later, beneath a canopy of stars, Samuel and Clara walked along the railroad tracks, their conversation flowing like the gentle current of the nearby creek. They spoke of dreams rekindled, of journeys taken, and those yet to come. The train's whistle sounded softly in the distance, a reminder that life's path is ever winding, ever moving forward. And so, in the quiet town of Willow Creek, where the old railroad carried stories through time, new chapters began to unfold.